What's going on, guys? TG or ThunderGod here, and you read the title, you saw the thumbnail, you already have problems with me. I don't even know how it's possible. I'm just a man on your computer screen, but we already have fake beef in your mind. Isn't that crazy? Anyway, what am I talking about? Today we are talking about Obito Uchiha, and it became clear to me when I was doing my tier list stream that there's a ton of confusion on just how to accurately discuss this character, his scaling, or just everything about him, or how strong he is generally during Naruto Shippuden. So I'm gonna try my best to shed some light on this. I will also say that this video is a collaboration between me and Cameron, so definitely check him out because we kind of fused together to make this video happen. But regardless, let's just get straight into discussion. Now, before we actually get into some of his abilities or anything like that, I want to take a look at Obito's physical stats and set up a bit of a baseline for him. This is something very few people seem to be able to agree on, assuming he just spams Kamui, which is true, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not disagreeing with that, but I do think his physical showings are rather impressive if you know where to look. At the absolute lowest baseline, Obito is able to block a swing from Suigetsu, or more accurately, his Executioner's Blade. Suigetsu and his Executioner's Blade have been shown to spar with Kisame and his Samehada. This not being explicitly shown, but noted in the manga, with the duo remarking that they were just having fun, with this sparring session being more explicitly shown in the anime. The Executioner's Blade itself actually may just be outright superior to Samehada, and I know that sounds crazy, but the Databook 2 glossary actually notes, Samehada, Kisame Hoshigaki's Cherish Sword. To an extent, its strength rivals the Executioner's Blade, used by Zabuza, and it's unlike any other type of mystery. This may seem kind of weird considering Zabuza is the first main antagonist our heroes kind of encounter in the series, but if you actually take a closer look at the feats, they actually kind of do somewhat support this interpretation. Or at the very least, the blades are just relative to one another in terms of strength. We actually see that Kisame is able to have his shoulder pierced via a non-amplified sword strike from B. This being non-amplified due to Samehada siphoning off the Raiton or chakra surrounding the blade, with B being unable to cut through the Executioner's Blade or Samehada with just his basic strikes. In fact, he actually had to amplify his sword with Raiton to start cutting through the Executioner's Blade with his own, which Suigetsu also notes is his specific weakness. Suigetsu being above B's own blades without chakra enhancement, as he just outright shatters it once the Raiton weakness is removed, which puts Obito in a really good position as a baseline in terms of physical, since he can block these sword swings that are above the type of attacks that are able to damage Kisame, which, if you want to look a little further, like to the beginning of part 1, 30% of Kisame's chakra survived in a Sakujaku barrage. So it's kind of funny to think about too that Obito's physicals on a baseline would just also be above a beginning of Shippuden 6-gate guy, which is kind of ridiculous. Now, while this is a good baseline, you can pretty easily argue most characters who are supposed to be at Obito's level should be able to damage Kisame and should just have better durability feats than this. So we need to look at some higher interpretations or just different feats for Obito to get his physicals higher. I think one of the best ways to look at this is off of his interactions with Minato. Obito's interactions versus Minato are very interesting, not just to me, but in general, just because a lot of people's perception or interpretations of the feats kind of vary. I do think Minato is consistently the faster combatant. I'm using faster holistically here, so just bear with me for a sec, but Obito may actually surpass him in terms of physical strength. There's a few indicators of this. One of the more blatant examples is when Obito catches Minato's arm after Minato attempts to slice through Obito's head. On panel, we actually see Minato's arm is the only arm that's visibly shaking, with him attempting to break out of Obito's grasp, which is the normal human reaction to your arm being grabbed. You would just try to get your arm free. Yeah, Obito and his arm are firm in their placement, meaning Minato is the one trying to escape Obito's grasp physically, yet can't. Even if you argued Minato slowed down his kunai strike after seeing Obito wasn't tangible, it'd have no bearing on Minato trying to escape Obito's grasp after the strike was completely stopped. This isn't a one and done, as we see a similar situation occur when Obito uses the chains versus Minato. Obito only uses his right arm to make the chain go taut, and we see a similar scene where Minato is physically attempting to break out of the chain with the same struggling lines inserted yet can't. This being a regular chain basically means it has to be Obito's strength that's restraining Minato, or the force he outputted to make the chain tighten, as if he wasn't, Minato would have just loosened the chain around him via his own physical might. This becomes more impressive when you consider that Minato is someone whose own physical might would allow him to tear through the Raikage's lightning armor with just a basic kunai, or with the Sage Mode level amp survive multiple taijutsu strikes from Ten Tails Madara, one to Minato himself and the other to his arm severed from his body, both remaining intact entirely. Now, you may be able to argue that Minato is not in a full power state, as he had previously been suppressing the Nine Tails throughout the entirety of Naruto's childbirth, but that's okay, because even if you scale Obito physically to this Minato in a vacuum, this Minato physically is pretty impressive as well. We actually know Minato directly controls contributed to stopping Kurama's claw strike when he attempts to kill baby Naruto. After Minato seals half the Nine Tails inside of himself, Kurama actually shrinks a bit, which makes the adamantine chains that were holding him down loosen up, as obviously he's no longer a bigger target, which leads to him attempting to kill Naruto. We then see Kushina and Minato kind of jump in to intervene or protect Naruto. What's interesting about this is that even though we see both of them jump in, Minato's actually the one directly pushing against the Nine Tails, as we have a panel showing both of Minato's heels skirting against the ground, directly resisting the Nine Tails strike. And we know Kushina made the adamantine chains go taut after the Nine Tails strikes because its arm is still shaking right above Naruto's head, which directly matches the Nine Tails in the following panel where he's shaking and the chains have the squeeze sound effect on them. So the way this scene plays out in my mind is that Kushina and Minato had intercepted the strike, stopped the Nine Tails, giving Kushina enough time to actually tighten her hold. But the fact that Minato was actually able to somewhat circumvent this strike and apply enough counteractive force to where the Nine Tails didn't just tear straight through into Naruto, I think does say something. And this is especially more impressive because this is after Minato seals the Nine Tails inside himself, where he notes his body is going numb and he can't believe how heavy the chakra is. This would all scale back to Obito, who could physically restrain. Even if you have this being a more fatigued version of Minato at the start of a fight, it would still be a much more primed version, the one that scales to stopping the Kurama claw strike. This also being insane because this is half of Kurama, and we've seen what insane feats half of Kurama's chakra can perform in the series. Obito would scale to all of this physically, which, I mean, it should be pretty self-explanatory since, you know, he's the one performing these feats. But even if you weren't convinced, Obito is capable of breaking his own arm off. So even then, like, all of these strength feats he's able to perform on his own body. So Obito on a baseline should scale beyond the likes of the 7 ninja swords like Executioner's Blade or Samehada, which are also more durable than the likes of Kisame himself. And just on a higher end, just should scale to Minato in terms of physical dexterity. How impressive that is to you kind of is dependent on how impressive you think Minato is as an individual. If you think Minato is like garbage and isn't really that strong, this obviously isn't going to be that impressive to you. If you put a lot of stock into Minato as a fighter, this is going to become more impressive to you. I lean into the latter more, but it shouldn't really make too much of a difference. Something to note too about Obito and the Minato fight is that he actually does see Minato outright react to a full power Nine Tails, one that has both halves of Kurama's chakra, the yin and yang half, which is kind of interesting because it kind of implies Obito thought he would be able to combat that level of speed if he knew Minato could dodge Kurama's strike. A lot of people are iffy on Obito's reaction times, but I think they're insanely cracked. And it's kind of weird that people just place this big focus on passive Kamui, but won't look at the insane reactions Obito has and how few people are really going to be able to capitalize on him actually materializing. A lot of people like to use the V1 Raikage example from the summit. Obito's Kamui is passive in nature. I'm going to talk about Kamui in a second, but it doesn't really matter. That's not really that good of a feat. 40 different people and their grandmothers, the whole family line, can react to that version of the Raikage. A much better reaction feat that you can use for Obito, which also does extend to his physicals, is him outright reacting to Kakashi's Kamui in the summit. This is outright towards the end of the summit after Sasuke and Naruto had their Chidori clash. Kakashi notes, Sakura, watch over my body, I'll get rid of Madara right here and right now, and you see him attempt to use Kamui, in which Obito actually responds to Kakashi, don't bother, that jutsu won't work on me, and raises his hand. The reason this is a reaction feat for Obito is because Kakashi didn't just name the jutsu. Text only appears in Naruto when a technique is activated. So Kakashi did activate Kamui. Obito literally just reacted and raised his arm before Kakashi actually created the hole or like the breach into the Kamui space and sent the target in there. This is an insane speed feat when you consider how much faster Kamui is than Kakashi's own combat speed. The fact that Kakashi's the one who cancels the jutsu in response to Obito and Obito's physical movements is actually such an insane speed feat. You have examples like Kakashi comboing the nail, which Pain wasn't able to see with his basic Rinnegan. You could maybe argue Pain might have seen it with his extra sensory mode or when Pain's locked in with his Rinnegan. But this already does set up a pretty good speed tier for Obito. If you want to take it a step further, Kakashi's Kamui is able to react to 2 short distance arrows from Sasuke Susanoo. Obito's physicals and reaction would obviously scale above all of this as he's reacting to Kakashi's use of Kamui and just reacting before the jutsu even begins to initiate. The jutsu has begun, but the technique itself hasn't really emerged or taken form, which is just such a dumb speed feat. It's stupid. Obito scaling above Sasuke Susanoo arrows as a baseline and physically is just insane stock and also adds to why he would feel confident in taking on Minato, especially with Minato's reaction feats against the Nine Tails. It all goes hand in hand. So when people say like Obito just relies on passive Kamui, I mean, yeah, but realistically, you're going to need to be so much faster and react so much better to actually catch him. And having his baseline reactions be at this high level is just 40 degrees of stupid, since these arrows would just skewer most people in Shippuden up to a certain point. Like, any of these arrows are pretty much blitzing any of the Kage during the summit and most characters in the series at this point, if I'm being entirely honest. So we already have some good fundamentals to argue for Obito. Now, in terms of his actual scaling, I think above KCM1 Naruto but below KCM2 Naruto is just the safest range for him. The reason I say this is that Minato's statements about mastering the Nine Tails power to defeat Obito more than likely put Naruto a tier above Obito, at least in strength, as he just displays much closer feats to someone like Rinnegan Obito. But he also should be above KCM1, since all of the statements in reference to KCM1 are Naruto controlling the Nine Tails chakra, Naruto only having a certain amount of control versus mastering the Nine Tails chakra, with the mastery part being what's needed to defeat Obito, which is kind of why I lean towards him just being over KCM1 but below that Kurama link mode. Most people are aware of this. If you've just read Naruto, you will note that these statements just are pretty self-explanatory. However, a different way to perceive Obito's scaling potentially is off of Giru Zetsu. Giru Zetsu is the swirly Zetsu body that Obito wears and is also controlling Yamato later in the war arc. This being relevant as Obito is either at the same level as the Giru in the war arc or just outright stronger. The reason I say this is because before Obito has his awakening, where he awakens his Mangekyo and some extra abilities that I'm going to talk about in a second, he's directly noted with his broken or fragile body to be weaker than Giru, who is planning on doing all of the fighting. This being before Obito's awakening. And when Obito has this awakening, Giru just outright hands control over Obito's body, which is confirmation almost that Obito had surpassed Giru at that point and was a superior fighter than Giru, controlling Obito's body even when he's awakened. Giru, as kind of like a husk or host body, does amplify a shinobi's abilities, as when he's using Yamato as a host, he's actually able to use, it's never noted to be Shinsu Senju or Hashirama's Thousand Arm Buddha, but he's just able to create a wood style construct on a similar tier that takes a similar form, with Obito being a more noted wood style user by Giru's own admission, kind of noting why Madara chose him, along with the data book noting that Obito is able to use the wood cutting springs technique, which is noted the highest ninchu of blood shedding ability among the wood release. So the Obito that actually awakened his MS and has those additional abilities pop out should actually be a superior host body to Yamato, which should at the bare minimum put him on that level of combination or above if you want to go off Giru's control and if he actually controls the target or not. This obviously being relevant since Giru Zetsu was able to pretty much stonewall Hiruzen, like an Edo Hiruzen who's like a buffed version of the alive one, can actually use the multi-shadow clone technique without cutting down his lifespan, with Giru just being on par or able to stonewall this Hiruzen, and vice versa, Hiruzen stonewalling Giru, so they're clearly relative, along with just Giru beating down a more fatigued 5 Kage, who, even though they have some chakra, you can just argue that they're probably not full power since the Madara fight had occurred, which also has good implications for Obito, because that would also just shoot him up to a Sannin tier or above if you think Edo Hiruzen is just above the Sannin, and an alive version is at Sannin level. I think this is a solid additional scaling chain, since a lot of people focus on, Minato's statements and try to, off different interpretations, arbitrarily place Obito. But I think if you go off Giru, they also do have some really good implications depending on your interpretation. I think if you take a baseline and just say he's relative or on the same level as Yamato being controlled by Giru, the inferences are just crazy good for Obito. Now, before I talk about Kamui, I do want to talk about some of Obito's more latent abilities, since a lot of people don't think that he actually has additional jutsu or can do more than just Kamui grab people, which is already a pretty broken win con, but I figure I might shed some light on additional win conditions that Obito may have. I already briefly touched on the fact that Obito does have wood style. This is something that he displays later on with his Rinnegan, which doesn't have any bearing on if his wood style mastery would increase, so he should have it in his orange mask form. Obviously, he's noted as a user of the cutting springs technique, which he also uses at the top of the 10 tails and when Giru is covering his body, but he also can just protrude wood style arms to suppress the likes of KCM2 Naruto as well. So these are abilities that Obito inherently has. Giru, even though you maybe can argue they're amplifying them for like the weakened version of Obito that's using his body, a full power version following the fact that has a fully functioning right side should be able to do them and is able to do them. I'm also of the opinion that Obito does have access to his 6 Pats abilities in his orange mask form. Now, I want to clarify some things that I maybe have said in previous videos, or just want to clear some air on this, because I kind of disagree with some of my interpretations, which happens, you make videos, things change, you learn. If I was sitting here and said the same stuff for a year, unsubscribe. Click X. I gotta be growing. So I kind of want to shed some light on this. I am of the opinion that Obito can use wood release and has access to 6 paths yin tone and in tone, shadow and light style, or yin and yang release. However, I want to make it clear, I believe Obito can only use these abilities on his right side. We see this when Obito actually awakens his Mangekyo Sharingan and Gyuruguru wraps around him. We actually see the black rods and wood style only protrude from Obito's right side. This is consistent with what Gyuruguru says prior to them engaging the hidden Mist Shinobi, that with Senju and Uchiha, a whole different strength may emerge. This makes a lot more sense since the half of Obito that's literally made up of Hashirama's DNA and his Mangekyo Sharingan are both on his right side. We also know Obito just outright took them out of his shoulder and used them as they're missing towards the end of the fight, coupled with the fact that that swirl of wood style that Obito used, or you see all that wood that he was using against the Mist Shinobi, is only protruding from his right side. So he did use these abilities, and these abilities only came forth on the right side that's like turbocharged. This is consistent with later showings of the abilities too, as Obito only uses wood style and black rods in the war arc from his right side, which adds another layer to why Obito actually leads with his right arm. If you actually go back and look at a lot of Obito's fights, he's always leading with his right arm to Kamui somebody, which makes a lot of sense since that side is replaceable. So if he takes damage, you know, he can replace it, but also he always just has access to more options if he really wants to use them. And obviously he doesn't most of the time, since Obito's MO is to just not reveal his arsenal and just kind of keep everything kind of, you know, wishy-washy. Oh, I don't know, you know, very cryptic. It makes sense why he wouldn't want to just reveal he has just Senju biology and can use wood style and black rods and all this crazy stuff. So even before Madara started teaching him jutsu, Obito subconsciously just awakened the ability to protrude the black rods on top of wood style, which is pretty insane. The only snafu we really have in this is where you see Obito potentially use a black rod versus Konan, but because Obito's right side is destroyed, I lean towards this actually just being a random pipe, mostly due to the rod itself or pipe being used being hollow and it being a different color than the black rods shown in the manga, which the rods are just black and this pipe that Obito is using is kind of whitish. So for those reasons, I kind of disagree with that sentiment that I pushed earlier, mostly due to the fact that Obito only having 6 paths on his right side is much more consistent, and both accomplish the same thing. It's more so just discussing Obito having 6 paths in general. Wood style obviously being explanatory for its insane chakra suppression properties, and the black rods are known for nullifying movement, although chakra injection via the black rods is more so a result of the outer path via the Rinnegan, which is why Obito needs the Rinnegan for the actual, you know, Edo Jinchuriki that he uses later on. Obito's dojutsu is honestly just broken, insane, pretty much the best like base Sharingan user in the series in my opinion. He performs an EMS Madara level feat, since in the flashback where Madara performs or puts the Nine Tails under Genjutsu, we see he actually does use his base Sharingan, this only being after Madara awakens his EMS, and which should have actually raised his Genjutsu prowess even further even with his base Sharingan. So pretty impressive feat overall for Obito to just be comparable in base Sharingan to somebody who has an eternal Mangekyo Sharingan compared to Obito's just single Mangekyo. This also being more relevant if you go off the narrative or ideas presented that a Sharingan's power can only be unleashed when both are together, and Obito's only using one eye for his Genjutsu, so you actually may be able to imply his Genjutsu might be at half strength, since usually when Uchiha do use Genjutsu, they use both eyes to initiate it. A more interesting note for Obito's Genjutsu is when he actually peers into Kushina's seal and looks at the Nine Tails, this being something that Kurama directly compares to Madara when Sasuke does it himself in early Shippuden, so this already kind of sowed the seeds for it. But interesting enough, Kurama actually does say you when looking at Obito and seems angry, which is kind of a weird reaction, but it kind of does play into Kurama potentially believing Madara is Obito at this point. There's not a ton of supporting evidence. One interesting point is that in the anime when Naruto and Kurama are having their conversation in the middle of the war, Kurama actually does reference Obito as Madara, which indicates that he did believe this. However, this is anime supplementary material and this isn't noted directly in the manga, so if you're not really into it, I don't really blame you. There's also the follow-up note of Obito controlling Yagura, who is not noted to be a perfect Jinchuriki, but is noted to have obtained true control over the Bijou. This is rather interesting and an important distinction because it's very possible that Yagura and Isobu weren't buddy-buddy, and if Yagura was being controlled, Isobu just didn't feel the need or want to actually break him out of the Genjutsu, or that Obito was simply controlling both. It's still a really good feat, just really weird, and most people are aware of it, so I feel like I don't have to spend too much time on it. After this, I would make a slight point of Izanagi. Obito's Izanagi should be able to last for 10 minutes, assuming he's actually actually able to activate the jutsu. So he essentially activates it, and for 10 minutes, anything that happens during that 10 minutes, he's able to rewrite. The reason I say it's 10 minutes is it's implied Obito initiated the Izanagi when Conan initiated her, ocean of paper bombs, and she blew them all up and they would explode for 10 minutes. We see right before the 10-minute explosion initiates, Obito break his mask, indicating he's going to use the Sharingan on the other side. So the implication is that he initiated the Izanagi right then and there. Will concede it could be 5 minutes and Obito just phased for 5 minutes and then used Izanagi for the other 5 minutes. Narratively, 10 minutes makes more sense since it directly foils Danzo's 10 minutes, who needed multi-Sharingan plus less Hashirama cells versus singular Sharingan and more Hashirama cells to achieve a similar result. So Obito just has far more mastery. So the 10 minutes just kind of is a little cleaner if you look at it narratively as well. 10-minute Izanagi on top of everything I just listed is kind of stupid broken as well. That's just another layer to Obito's arsenal. The last thing I would probably bring up, well, I love how I phrased this like this isn't the only thing to bring up. Kamui, obviously. I don't want to talk about Kamui crazy since most people are aware about it. They're aware about the passive nature of it, how Obito's able to phase subconsciously. I don't really want to waste too much time talking about it. The only thing I will note is that Obito should have access to all of the weapons that he used in the war arc, since all of those weapons are from Madara's weapon cache that we see Obito pass by when he goes to take on the hidden Mist Shinobi and save Kakashi and Rin. Now, if Obito actually did store those in the Kamui dimension after the fact, or if he only did that during the war, which he was actively preparing for, we really don't know. I just want to make a point that he should have access to all these weapons. And we see the giant shuriken he used along with the Bijou suppressing rods that he uses later on as well. This coupled with Obito's fire style that he can obviously utilize with Kamui as well pretty much sets it up that he also does have a pretty insane arsenal of range jutsu that he can use if you give him the benefit of the doubt. I could go more into depth on Kamui here, but I feel like I've just been rambling for 20 minutes and most people are acutely aware of Kamui and its functions and its, how it functions is more so relevant to who Obito's fighting, and I highly doubt I could just enhance your understanding of the technique by just me sitting here and preaching information you've probably heard before. So let me know what you guys thought down below, if you agree, disagree, why. If you guys want to see me talk about like the top 3 of the Akatsuki in this sort of fashion, or maybe do some more matchups like Obito versus Itachi or Pain, I don't know, man. If you don't have him as the strongest, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to say, bro? Like, we've been here for 20 minutes. I feel like we've connected on such a spiritual level, and if you still hate me, I can only do so much for you, you know what I mean? So that's the video. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, like and subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.